We can plot that out.
I am
I would be happy. You can come over, you can watch, you can do some of it.
Oh, I'd love that. All right.
Is this the only microphone?
She's
Welcome everybody, and thank you for coming out for the tour. Our organization, Public Accountability for Our Capital, and with the help of a sister organization, Save Our Capital, conducts a tour to tell you why we don't like the current plan of the Capitol Annex Project. The Capitol Annex Project has three components. We're standing right now where the visitor center is planned to go. And the visitor center would start at the sidewalk. Thank you. Would start at the sidewalk. Let me do this while I'm speaking. With a ramp down to a basement level where you would enter a building whose roof would be approximately at the level where we're standing now and extend out to about where the grass is now. And on top of that roof would be a peaked skylight. So as visitors were in that visitor center, they could look up and see the facade. We argue that the Constitution prohibits anything that affects the view from Tower Bridge, with specific language protecting this facade. Seems to us the visitor center is not following the rule of protecting that view. It interrupts that view. But there is no plan to replace what Ewell Hauser called California's front yard. This is where we gather. This is where our Christmas tree goes. This is where the end of the California Tour of Bicycle occurs, or the race for all kinds of wonderful events. So without a planned replacement of this, we oppose the visitor center. The other two elements we'll talk about are the demolition of the annex and the construction of a two-story underground parking garage, wiping out just a huge area of trees. So we're against all three, and we'll talk to you about all three.
And I'll speak to you more about the trees. I worked as an urban ecologist for years for the U.S. Forest Service, and I used this park as a training ground, as did many research people, many professors. This was begun to be established in 1868. Those deodars that you see are original trees, and the visitor center is going to go out to the edge of the crowns of those trees. And that will, we believe, damage any roots that are cut. You're going to see a reflection and depth in the top. So if you look at these, each tree holds 50,000 pounds of carbon. So this whole park, I've done the analysis, and it holds so much carbon, and also cleans the air, provides shade for events all the time, and we're going to lose up to 188 trees.
Ouch!
So, yeah, there's 60 trees that they flat out say they're going to be removing. We'll take a walk, and I'll show you trees that are going to be removed, trees they say might be removed or maybe not, which we believe, or I believe, will mean that they're going to be removed. They just don't want to say it. And then we'll look at the palms that they're going to remove for their parking garage. So we've got to do kind of a fast walk today, and just keep up, okay? We're gonna stop at 5 different points, and you're welcome to ask questions at those points.
How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for coming again and speaking on this.
Absolutely.
It's great. So I have a question. So while we're filming, on the security aspect of this glass business, I know somebody else spoke on it, but what can you talk about in terms of security issues?
So the question, I don't think I reached the mic here. Okay, so our main concerns about security are in the replaced annex and the parking garage. I think they'll be able to secure the entrance to the visitor center here, although a glass skylight makes one wonder you know, is that a possible entry point? But the proposed new building that would replace the annex is a glass-skinned building which provides no cover, no concealment for the officers who may be trying to move important people out of harm's way.
You're not live.
I know.
Yeah, he's just answering my separate question, but he's live on my phone. Your phone.
Then additionally, this parking garage, as you can see on the diagram, wraps 3 sides of the proposed new annex, and that provides entry points for both explosives or poisons or gas.
Many options.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Dick.
Some of the trees that are going to be permanently removed are these magnolias for the visitor center.
Say again, please.
Some of the trees that will be permanently removed are the magnolias along here. All of them on that side and 2 of them on this side. Hey, we're supposed to be a leader in climate change, right? To remove trees.
This is the south side of the Capitol. Heading towards the annex.
That communication cable is
That's a lot of cable.
okay. All right, so we're here where you can see the end of the 1860s Capitol and the beginning of the 1950s annex. Why was the annex built? California after World War II was just a different place than prior to World War II. Explosive growth in new industries, new issues for the legislature to deal with, and so space was absolutely needed for this growing California. The decision to build in this style was made by the architect Alfred Eichler, who was a state employee. Today, the state contracts out its building design. But in those days, the division of the state architect has a different name now, department. The division did its design in-house, and Eichler didn't want to imitate the ornamentation style of the 1860s work, but he wanted to build a building a little more narrow, a little less tall, and as short as he could make it to meet the requirements of the legislature. He chose granite for the base and plaster for the top to match the Capitol so it would be harmonious, but deliberately not copying it. The style of architecture is called mid-century modern, and we think it's important architecture, it's high-quality architecture. Unfortunately, it's not sexy architecture 70 years on from its construction, just like 70 years after this 1860s building was built, we took out those stupid walnut stairways. We instead put in really cool grid ceilings. Ooh. And we did all kinds of terrible things to that building. So the leaders of California's legislature, when they saw that, enacted several laws. We talked about one protecting the facade, another creating the Historic State Capitol Commission, on which Paula and I both served until our voices were being ignored, and we decided to leave the commission and begin trying to convince all of you that we should turn this project around.
The new trees here, these palms, everything that you see right adjacent to this building will be removed. The new building will come out to about, well, almost to where this planter space is. So it will be wider, it will be a little taller, and it will take out all the trees that you see that are in front rows here.
So let me say, as you look at the diagram that Kate is holding, you can see some angled red lines, and they indicate that at about this spot here, the parking garage begins its construction. So a 2-story underground parking garage will be angling a little closer than that angled sidewalk that we can see. And of course, above a 2-story deep underground parking structure, we don't think any tree of any substance will survive. So if someone says, well, we'll move it back, we're very suspicious that that would be successful.
Why are they doing this?
Why are they doing
The question is, why are they doing this? So Mr. Cooley would like to bring back to the Capitol the permanent staff of the standing committees who currently live in this legislative office building, believing that better government can occur if all of the committee staffs are in the same building with their legislature. All right, he knows how to run a legislature. He's been around a long time.
Who's
So,
Mr. Cooley?
he's the chair of the Joint Rules Committee. Great, thank you for asking. And he's the one driving the project. We think he could reach his goals if he had first asked a preservation architect, here are my goals, there's my current building, what can I do? But he didn't do that. He instead went around and used the word demolition when he was telling legislators we could improve our government. And now he's backed into the corner that he sold the project on the idea of demolition, and instead of going through what Paula and I and others recommended, a genuine study of preservation.
Oh yeah, let's blow it up. That's a good idea of preservation.
And build a parking lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Where are they going to go live?
So the legislators and the governor and his executive staff are currently working from a swing building a block and a half away.
You can see the top of it there.
That's the new building.
That's the new building. So they'll work from there, and if we're successful, they'll work from there while we rehabilitate this building. Yeah. Or their current idea is they'll work from there while this one is demolished and the new, wider, taller, bigger, longer building gets built.
So what did that cost when they built it?
Oh, I don't have a good number, but I doubt it was 20 bucks a foot. Today we're at about 1,300 bucks a foot to build a public building. We think we could save about $500 million with the rehabilitation. What is your question?
So I don't know if it was the 70s or the 80s when they renovated and restored this structure. And it's my understanding it was renovated back to the original, I mean, not the entire thing, but most of it was to look like the original 1800 whatever. What happened to that idea? I mean, and that would include the facades and the whole front and the rotunda in the front.
Correct. This building was rehabilitated with modern fire code requirements, fire sprinkler,
For
modern air
millions of
conditioning,
dollars.
Wi-Fi. It's got everything one needs in a public building, and it's safe while preserving its original appearance. The state knows how to do that. We think it should do exactly that in this building. It's a 70-year-old building, so it needs work. Yes. Should we move along?
Yep.
I have a real quick question though. With so many people working from home or whatever, why do they have to have a parking garage when people aren't driving downtown?
So DGS, in fact, has done a study of state employees and the possible efficiencies of squeezing more work into smaller square footage, but the legislature has said, we don't think that applies to us, we don't think that works for us. I like your question about why a parking garage anyway. If things go the way we all believe they will, our legislators won't be driving their Buicks to the Capitol. They'll be taking public transit. So,
Set an example.
yes, exactly. Great point.
So the trees, all these trees will be gone along here. All the shrubbery, that magnificent, really incredible magnolia, southern magnolia. The cherries right along here, crab apples, sorry, the crab apples along here will be gone. This tree will be gone. And they are going to try to protect in place. We have the United States' largest cockspur coral growing here, and that's this tree with the scraggly branches. And in the spring, it's absolutely gorgeous with red blooms all over it. So when we get here, let's stop a little instead of right next to the traffic here. So the new underground parking area is going to go in here, in and out here. It will take out, and no doubt further damage, this cockspur coral, even though it's supposed to be protected in place. You know, they're going to have to go closer than the drip line of the tree, and with contemporary arboricultural practices, the drip line of the tree isn't how you decide where protective gridding is going to go to keep equipment away from it. You measure the diameter of the tree, you measure the height of the tree, and then there's a formula that tells you how much further out your protective gridding is going to have to be. So along with that, we have 43 palms. There's some 20 on this side and 20 on the L Street side, which are going to have to be moved. The problem is, no one in California that I have ever spoken to has ever tried moving palms that are so large. And there's only been a 50-50 success rate in moving palms at all in downtown Sacramento. The normal way to even attempt to do this would be to move every other palm first. And then you would band the tops to a palm that's already stable. And we have no idea who's going to be doing this, how they're going to do it, but they're going to move all of them on both sides. You know how our north-south winds are. They can go down like dominoes.
And this is for the curb cuts, if you will, the turn-in lanes, so that you can enter the parking garage and exit the parking garage. We have to move those palms out of the way for that. I say, let's just not do the garage, folks. We got a parking garage the state owns. We've got parking garages the city owns. There's empty land on which above ground parking can be built for half the cost of below ground parking. Lots of ways to solve that problem. Let's just not give up this land. I don't know, I haven't prepared you for this question, but if this were a concrete slab top of a parking garage, can any tree of any size grow on top of the slab?
Small trees, but you know, you're not going to get
It'll be a struggle.
trees like this to grow.
I have a question.
But yes,
If when there was a cost-benefit analysis, did anyone put a value on a tree?
I did.
I mean, in the state's cost-benefit
No.
analysis of
So
projecting
the
this
state
project.
did no cost-benefit analysis. The analysis of the rehabilitation or off-site parking, if we say it was done at all, it was a sentence or two in the EIR. And we believe full restoration and an economic analysis is required by law, by statute. It's a historic building. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. You can't demolish it without doing step 1, 2, 3, which they haven't done.
Can trees be designated historic? I mean, these palms are
Yes,
100
this
years old.
tree is on a national register.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole park is on the National Historic Register, along with the annex and the restored Capitol.
Talk a minute about the arboretum nature of its original creation.
Yeah, the whole point of developing this park was in 1868, they decided they wanted it to be a place where rare trees from all over the world grew. And they did it. You know, they had 81 species at the time that came from all continents of the world except Antarctica. Nowadays, you have a really hard time doing that because of quarantine and that. But we've been working with UC Davis Arboretum to grow some replacement trees for these rare trees. There are 864 trees, 210 unique species. And as I said before, 188 of those are threatened by this.
Wow.
I have a quick question. When the lane for parking access goes in, do we know how much parking will be lost?
Public parking?
On the street.
That's a good question.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I would guess maybe 10 spaces each side.
Is there a date that they are thinking they're going to start doing this?
So they've been, good question. The question is there a date when they believe they'll start? So we have been told that preparatory work is underway now. We see that there is communication cable you can see outside the building. We think that's so that legislators in the new building, the swing space building, can talk to the chamber with either data or landlines. There's a generator on the other side. They've gone into the west or switch gear. We think that'll help power the 1860s Capitol if demolition were to occur and the switch gear in the basement is taken out of service. They've actually done some work in the 1860s Capitol, turning the visitors theater where you watch the films into a distribution room for cable for data and voice. I don't think that was in the EIR, but they did it anyway. So they're doing work now. They've already awarded the demolition and the abatement contract, so we're trying to stop them. We got this morning, I guess, a notice that within 30 days they plan to start the tree removal.
Wow, that's fast.
Question here.
So how do we stop this? Is there like any public commentary that would be heard, or?
So we think there are really only 3 people in the state who can stop the project, or as we're asking, pause it and replan it and look at the alternatives. Seriously look at them. That's the governor, the speaker pro tem, the Speaker of the Assembly, and the President pro tem of the California Senate. So if you know them, and invite them over to dinner and convince them what a terrible idea this is. We find that emails are counted but not opened or read. So snail mail to those 3 people or a phone call to their office might count. We're suspicious of whether that will really do any good. So on the postcard that is available for a handout from Kate, who's got the sign, you'll find the website for public accountability for our Capitol, and we've raised about 3/4 of the money we need to fund the lawsuits that we think are the only thing that will get them to pause, and if they pause, maybe they'll replan. So if you can contribute something to the cost of that lawsuit, that would be a great help.
So, can I take this now? Not very many people know this is going to happen. From what I read from Paula's website is there's 3 guys or somebody who made the decision, and it was never even put up to a vote or anything. So I haven't seen it on the news. Have you all approached Paul Curtis or one of those news expose kind of like our local channels?
Yes.
And say we don't want this to happen. Not only do we not want to lose the trees, but we don't want to have that hideous glass whatever thing up
We've been in continuous contact with the Sacramento Bee, with the LA Times, with the San Francisco Chronicle, with all the television stations. In fact, one of the first places and one of the only places that did a more extensive interview with us was Capitol Public Radio. And that was well over a year ago on that.
And Rob Turner of Sacktown
Yes.
Magazine, Rob Turner, Sacktown Magazine, did a wonderful article. We have gotten some press coverage, but you know, we are competing with a few other stories like an election and a pandemic and economic shutdown. It's been a tough year to get attention. But yes, the press has given us a shot. You know, it's not a hair on fire story. The minute the trees come down, they'll be out here, I guarantee you.
It's too late.
You know, yeah. And it's a sad thing. But no, the legislature elected to not do public outreach meetings about the project, even though the executive branch does that when they do their project. I was telling someone, I think the second PERS campus had 28 public outreach meetings. You know, what kind of housing can we help you build as we take up real estate? What kind of retail should we replace? What are you worried about in the neighborhood? You know, really good job, a great job of doing outreach. The state knows how to do this. The state knows how to restore old buildings to modern codes. The Library Courts building across the street won a national award for beautifully preserving all of its murals and beautiful plaster work while providing fire sprinklers and air conditioning and modern exits and elevators. The state knows how to do this. The Joint Rules Committee, led by Assemblyman Cooley, painted himself into a corner, doesn't want to even talk about any of that.
Has the state historic preservation officer made any kind of a statement or any comment on this? And also, how about some of the federal or the state codes, Public Resources Code 5024.5, which the legislature established to make sure that historic buildings were protected in cases like this?
So that's a very interesting question. The legislature has declared, since it's not a state agency, it doesn't have to go to the state historic preservation officer. And that's very interesting because one of the statute lines they wrote is, this statute shall apply to any state authority, including the University of California, all kinds of things that are not state agencies. But they think they don't have to go to the State Historic Preservation Office, so they did not.
So they've never been asked to provide comment?
Exactly so.
And they haven't said anything at this point?
Yes.
Well, and it's also interesting that, you know, as Dick's referred to before, we were part of the Historic State Capitol Commission, which is mandated to provide guidance to joint rules. And they have not, we lost a person. There are 4 people, 4 voting members from the public that are chosen by the
Senate and the
Assembly. And none of those exist now. And they've done nothing since 2019, I guess?
Yeah, so the commission has not met. Our advice was inconvenient truth. You remember that term, right? Yeah. And so basically they began not replacing members whose terms had ended. They began not giving us documents. And so Paula led a resignation so that we could speak out to the public. While we were sitting as commissioners, our charge was to advise the legislature. Since they weren't listening, we thought we should come out and tell you.
So what, SHPO is one of the lawsuits, right?
So there are 4 lawsuits currently filed to get attention to pause the project. One of the 4 is to force the legislature to pause the project and go visit the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office.
What's the budget for this?
So if you count the swing building as part of the project, it's about $1.3 billion. If you say, well, the swing building can be used after the project's over anyway, then we're at about $900 million. We think just the rehabilitation, $380 million, and a parking garage over here, $80 million, so less than half of the budget. We think the needs could be met in a more cost-effective way. So I'm worried that we should move to our next spot
Where's
to
the
take
money
questions.
coming from?
Your pocket.
Taxes.
Yeah. Say it again.
Now we get a letter on audio.
So who has fiscal responsibility for approving this when the public is in the situations we've been in for the past 2 years and people don't understand how they can do this, but they do it anyway?
So a
ask
person is
permission.
asking the question, who has fiscal oversight over the legislature? And the short answer is no one. The legislature owns that building. It's the only building they own. The state executive branch owns and operates all the other buildings. But if we say, yes, it's a 70-year-old building and it needs attention, we would say to the legislature, where have you been for 70 years then, if you think it needs attention?
I was under the impression that the people owned the building.
Well, that's what this gentleman agrees to.
We call it demolition by neglect as a choice. So everything you see here and going down this walkway will be underground parking lot, 2 stories deep. The trees, this giant sequoia, the redwood behind it, they say they will protect in place, but I don't know how they're going to do the excavation and protect those in place. No. Everything on the left side has to either be moved. If it's a small tree, they may be successful, but anything large is going to have to be taken out and is planned to be taken out.
Are they still talking about relocating to the UC Davis Arboretum for these trees?
No,
that was like years ago.
no. I worked with a group at UC Davis Arboretum to grow replacements.
Well, they were there. They were going to dig them up, transplant them over there, let them grow while they were doing with them.
They can't. They have to transplant them on the park. Yeah.
Really good questions today.
Yeah, absolutely.
The parking area is right through the middle of these trees. The ones that they're preserving, yeah.
Yeah. And for those of you who've been on a construction site, you know, if we plan to put a basement 2 stories below this level, we have to slope back the excavation so that it doesn't cave and it's safe for workers. And then you need a little distance. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a construction fence out there somewhere. You know, so this is a really significant amount of area.
Have they awarded any contracts?
Yes, so the state awarded to Turner Construction, which has a significant Sacramento office here, the job of being the construction manager or general contractor for whatever project we're able to convince them to do or what they want to do. The state awarded an architectural contract to Skidmore, Owings, Merrill, another strong firm, to do the design of whatever project we can talk them into. And Turner has awarded contracts for mechanical, air conditioning, electrical, plumbing, abatement, demolition subcontracts already.
What about the tree work?
I don't know.
They are not saying who's doing the tree work, even though it's going to start right away.
But can we do the old-fashioned way of chaining ourselves around the CHP?
You know, the CHP has been so generous to us in letting us have these tours, but everything is permitted. And we did actually ask, or I asked, if we could put price tags around every tree. But we can't attach anything to trees. So,
But we can kill them. Yeah, we kill them, but we can't put anything on them.
oh yeah, but that was done through special forces. That's the magnificent magnolia.
Look at the base of that thing.
You walk up to it.
Huge.
Your arms are like this across the base of it. Yeah, it's just it's going. It's going.
And there always is a gecko over here too, somewhere very large.
That's on the other side, and it will stay. The maple trees, the smaller maple trees back there, this because we're standing at the edge right now. The new building will be
20 till.
So we got 20 minutes.
Could we get more senators and legislators and more people that they need more space? I mean, they're living in this building. Why do they need more?
Great question. Yeah.
How are they gonna follow the money?
everybody needs to be located in the same location. But some are already in the legislative office building. Dick.
What?
The other thing.
Microphone.
We can hear you. You're live. You're live.
Sorry, someone asked another question. Sorry.
Where was I?
The footprint.
The legislators were in that other
Yeah,
building over there.
yeah. And they're going to be in the swing building. They have parking under the swing building. They're going to be in the legislative office building. But there's our national capital is based on a campus approach. And so everybody is in different buildings, and there are underground tunnels that lead them to legislative office. There are numerous underground tunnels here. There used to be one from the bar at the old Senator Hotel to the main conference room. They could build a tunnel much cheaper.
Oh, yeah.
And stay where they are.
And they've relocated so many of the state employees to other locations or sent them home. And there's a lot of state buildings that are empty right now because I work for Food and Ag. And so why can't they put the legislators in the adjacent buildings, create your campus, and move the rest of us all out? Move Food and Ag, move Caltrans out to North Gate or out that
Well, it's
way.
like this morning, CHP asked for an extra $50 million because they now have to protect the swing building and this building. Why didn't they think about putting a tunnel in before? I bet $50 million would have covered it.
Oh, easily. I'd take that job. You would
Yeah.
too.
Exactly.
That wouldn't be the CHP getting money, which they do love.
Oh, yes, yes, but, logic. Logic is lacking.
Well, there's empty buildings out there that have been
Renee and Mike.
So they
Hey?
transplanting the little
Good, thanks.
Memorial Grove here. Some are gifts from Japan, the governor of Japan after World War II, but they're planning on transplanting those. And I think, at least for, look at the size of the trunks, but they put out surface roots, as you can see them here. It's one of the few trees in the park that actually puts out surface roots. Magnolias are the other one. And, but they're going to try and dig along the edges. If they're going to do that, they should actually do it in winter so that they stay in place and the roots can seal some. And then they can lift them and make a new memorial grove somewhere. But those are the only trees that are going to be transplanted, as well as this maple, which I think they might start having a hard time with success-wise, as well as the other maple on this side.
So this end of the building is a good place for us to talk about what the new building might look like. You can see the aluminum friezes up on this facade of the building and the aluminum work inside the portico. Those are sculptures done by Olaf Malmquist, who is probably the most famous architectural sculptor in Northern California. Did the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, just wonderful work. And we don't know what's going to become of that if the building is demolished. I just can't stand the idea of losing that. The replacement building, you won't believe this. I know you just won't believe this. But we saw a slide of the replacement building, and it's a glass skin, entirely glass, completely inharmonious with the 1860s Capitol. And from a security standpoint, glass skin provides no concealment or no cover if the Highway Patrol is trying to hurry you and I to a safe place if there were a terrorist out here doing bad things. And the parking garage would wrap the new building on 3 sides, and a parking garage, as you may remember from the 1990s attack in New York City, is where you drive your truck bomb, right?
Yeah.
So why would we think that's an improvement in security over what we have now? It's not. It's a terrible idea, inharmonious, insecure, and expensive. 3-time winner.
So this is the edge of the new building. So it extends further this way, it extends further that way, and that way. And you'll be able to see it from the mall.
320. If we took the basement,
So these palms are 2 more that are going to be supposedly moved. We don't know how successfully.
That's right.
And that magnolia is going to be completely removed. It's too big to be on top of a parking lot.
So then, Paula, all this area will be parking lot or building, one of the
Yes.
2, right?
Yes. And what we have on the right side is the remnants of the Civil War Memorial Grove, which Mr. Cooley is especially fond of. And even though there were originally 37 trees, they came from every major battlefield of the Civil War, and this was established in 1908. Today there are 5 trees left. And there just has never been an effort on the part of the legislature, the joint rules that's in charge of this park, to develop a tree management plan so that there's replacement, there's professional pruning done. It was only in 2014, after years of never having a certified arborist examine their trees, that the trees were in such bad shape that they had to call a certified arborist. And Brian Hill came in, and he called me afterwards, and he said, Paula, I can't believe nobody has died, because the risk associated with so many of these trees is immense. And I asked him then, I said, would you send me a copy of the report? And he said, well, the Historic State Capitol Commission will get a copy. I'll make sure you get a copy. So that's when this tulip here was topped, because it had multiple branches. It had been topped a lot of times before, and it's ancient, but they had to take the top out because there was so much rot above those points. This is the tree that's behind this palm, and the magnolia is the largest tulip in the country.
So interestingly enough, Capitol Park is not part of the state park system. So we can't blame the parks people. They know how to master plan parks. They know how to preserve parks. This park is probably owned by the legislature You would think we would know who owns it. Thank you. But it's actually kind of one of those quirks of law that it's not clear. The DGS attorney unofficially said he's pretty sure the legislature owns it, but no one has been master planning it. Maybe what we ought to do is ask the legislature to give up ownership of the building and the park because they so neglected upgrading the safety and the systems of the building, the only one they own, and they've neglected master planning and caring for the park. Maybe we ought to give it back to the executive branch. We'd be better off, I'm sure.
Mike Nielsen with Department of General Services is in charge of this park and multiple others for maintaining it and runs the grounds crews. And since he came on in 2014, there's just been a magnificent change. You know, the health of the trees has improved, but you can look at the root system on that tulip. You can't tell me that construction is not going to damage, especially when they take out this tree. As I said earlier, anytime you cut a root, there's going to be an effect on the crown. So if they go to transplant a lot of these trees, they'll cut, they'll lift with a tree spade, they'll move it, and then either wait to see what branches die off and then prune that further, or on the really larger trees, they pre-prune, which seems to me a little bit backwards because you don't know what's going to die.
Aside from there being is anything on the scale that are actually been done elsewhere? Some people would say, why would you do like that? There might be one, but the number of trees on the side seems like quite a long list.
There is an outfit that I think it's actually originally based in Idaho, but they're billed as the largest tree movers in the world, and they were hired at one point to take a look and evaluate which trees could actually be moved. And they even said that the moon tree, which we'll see shortly, could be successfully moved. And then all the certified arborists that I've talked to have said, you know, most of these trees cannot be because of their age, condition. They can't be. You're supposed to move trees that have a reasonable avenue of success. Yeah.
8 minutes.
Okay.
This magnolia is going to be removed for a parking lot area. And it's the magnolia that's on the front side of our sign in full bloom. This one. Yeah, it's the one on the front.
Questions asked, is the Office of the State Architect involved at all? I don't believe so. They may review the final plans for access compliance. I don't know they can ask to do that or not. That's commonly a role they have in state office buildings, but the only role.
Yeah. Getting ready. So you can see
Markings are already here.
all the markings preparing for construction. And as I said before, 10 trees that direction and 10 this direction, palms, have to be shifted.
And that's with the 50% survival rate, maybe?
Maybe, if we're lucky.
the rose garden.
You're welcome to join us for the end of it. So this is an area that's in preparation for the construction inside. And you can see that they've really only gone about pretty close to the drip lines of the trees for protection on the ones on the inside. This is, what's it called, a laydown area?
So yes, this would be a laydown area or a staging area for the builder for the abatement and demolition.
So this is our redwood grove that is to be protected in place. And I was involved, whenever they put in the security buildings, they didn't know which one of the trees was the moon tree. And the moon tree is a tree that the seed was flown to the moon on Apollo 14. When they came back, they propagated the seed, and different locations got one of the trees. So the moon tree, of course, ended up being the one that was closest to the building that they did. But now this building is going to come out this way, and I don't know how they're going to preserve the moon tree, let alone some of these others, because the root systems on redwoods are all intertwined, you know, and they grow together. So if they damage one tree, there may be little damage to other trees. And you can see where they've allowed, what are those called? The little
Runners?
sprouts. The sprouts at the base of the tree to grow. And that's because they think they might have to clone the tree, get the tree dies. So they'll take tissue, hopefully get used to Davis, and we'll have a second generation moon tree, not the original, but beautiful grove.
So we're about 3 minutes, so we give our closing info.
So, Paula, is there a city market? When I worked here in
What I'm after is the Sierras, and that's it. Never considered capital. You
we worked with Martin quite a bit on the trees here in the park, and I worked here in the building.
Really?
I was here when that big stone pine fell over. Were you here when that happened? Over here, one of those stone pines.
So we're almost at the end of our time. We promised we were going to be quick. Let me close my remarks by saying some of you may not have heard. What could we do to convince the legislature to pause the project and go through the replanning of saving our front yard, our gathering space, saving Capitol Park, and saving our nationally registered annex? We think only 3 people have the power to do that. So write or telephone, don't email, the governor, the assembly speaker, or the president pro tem of the Senate. Please go to our website and donate to our legal fund. We've raised about 3/4 of the money we need to fund the lawsuits to get their attention, but we need your help in finishing that fundraising. So let your voice be heard and open your wallets. It's a new year, so you get a whole new year of tax deductibility, right? And the organization that is collecting the money for the lawsuits is a 501c3. Yay! So those are deductible. Other questions?
Is the contact information for those individuals found on your website?
Yes, there is contact information on both websites. The link is only an email, so we'd rather that you look at the address for the governor and the speaker and the pro tem and do either a snail mail or a phone call, because that will make your voice count more.
The website is...
Talking points on the website.
Oh yes, the website has got all kinds of information and diagrams and articles and lists of alternative parking locations, and it's got all kinds of information on it. Yeah, become an expert, talk to your friends, spread the word. You're right, we have gotten press coverage, but we think a lot of the public hasn't really awoken to the danger to our park and our nationally registered building and our front porch.
I've given out 250 flyers in this park over the last month and a half, and not a single person knew about it. They were all shocked. So, Officer Mose, who has helped us a lot, and we wanted me to tell you that the Capitol itself is open. You can have a look. You can take a look and see what is already being done inside.
How much?
And what is closed off to us.
How much time do you have? I mean, no, not for this tour. What's the time? Can you give us some time
So
frame?
we think that the governor or the speaker or the president pro tem has got to pause the project in the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or irreversible damage will occur. So we've got to do it urgently.
Would that be on the website, like a timeline, like
So they have a website, I think it was last updated 2 years ago. That's their public outreach. Terrible lack of information in it. We're having to guess at the timeline because no one is telling us anything. When we can ask a specific question, if we wait long enough, we get a specific answer to that question only. This is probably the most secretive project I've been associated with, including I built hangars for the stealth fighter in the middle of Nevada. There was more knowledge about that project than there is about this one. This one is really a secret.
Everybody you talk to is under non-disclosure agreements, and that's been true for 2 years. That's why I decided to resign from the commission, because people would come, I could recognize the person from MOCA, which was a project coordinator on here, the Assembly's facilities person, all these, but you asked her that question, and it was like, don't know, we're under non-disclosure agreements.
Even the guys who work on the air conditioning inside the building, the techs and the landscape workers, had to sign non-disclosure agreements so they wouldn't talk to you about this project. Is that sad?
What do they have to hide?
Yeah, under Governor Brown. What year? 2017?
Yeah, and then the first legislation, I guess, was 2017. They do have the pieces of legislation that were passed on the Annex Assembly website. And those are pretty interesting to look at, because it's very clear. It says renovation, rehabilitation, or demolish. We know what they say.
Question over here?
Yeah, would you please state your names again?
My name is Paula Pepper. Pepper with only one P in the middle.
And I'm Dick Cowan, C-O-W-A-N. So we're the two people who were on the Historic State Capitol Commission.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thanks for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Good job.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great question.
Wow. Yeah, very insightful.
Nobody knows this.
Yeah.
Change that, please.
40 million people live here.
Everybody here, call somebody.
Right. Right.
Governor. Yeah, tell your friends.
I will take my mic back.
Okay.
That worked very well.
Thank you.
You can do the job.
And you can always actually visit them in their new offices. I posted all the new office numbers.
Are those three guys' names on here? Cooley? It is Ken Cooley. Brandon. But Cooley's on it.
Thank you.
One point.